and held a January 14th teleconference with health officials there, revealing, quote, the epidemic situation is still severe and complex, the most severe challenge since SARS in 2003, and is likely to develop into a major public health event. Despite that grim assessment, China's leaders didn't warn the public for 6 days. Had they acted immediately, one study estimates they could have cut the number of infected people by 2/3. But China's deceit, of course, doesn't stop there. It never does. Fox News learning late tonight that the U.S. now believes that China's initial claim that COVID-19 originated at a Wuhan wet market, I always knew that was, you know what, a lie, but now we've basically confirmed this. The belief is that the virus escaped from that high-security virology lab in Wuhan. Now, ironically, the Chinese lab was studying the coronavirus in order to supposedly prevent a pandemic. And patient zero now, remember, it was 5 weeks ago we asked, why don't we really know more about this patient zero? Well, now that would be patient zero was apparently a lab worker. So instead of warning the world, Fox is told that China moved to silence doctors and destroy lab samples. So China has to be held accountable for this plague. Luckily, Senator Josh Hawley has legislation to do just that. The Missouri senator joins me now. Senator, first tell us what your bill would do to hold them accountable, and tell us how the mouthpieces for Beijing, I understand, they're now targeting you.
Indeed. In fact, the Beijing government developed a video, put together a video, Laura, that called me a liar and called me to resign. So I figure I'm on the right path, and we're going to keep pushing ahead. Here's what my bill would do. Two things. Number one, it would set up a commission, an international commission led by the United States to get the truth. We know the truth isn't that this was just some happenstance occurrence that China didn't know anything about. We know they knew all about this. We know that they suppressed the evidence. And we know now it looks more likely than not it came from one of their own labs. So let's get the truth and let's hold them accountable for it. That's part number two. My bill would allow every citizen in this country who has been affected by the coronavirus to sue Beijing, to sue the Chinese Communist Party to get damages for it. That's the kind of accountability that we need.
And Senator Hawley, don't we need to move immediately to pull back our essential manufacturing from China? I mean, we need a new industrial policy. I know they have a lot of our medicines now, so you got to be careful, but this is an opportunity for the president to do what so many Americans have been asking for decades, frankly, getting our primary manufacturing back home, made in the USA.
Absolutely, and that's critical to surging out of this crisis, Laura. I mean, we've got to get our economy reopened as soon as we can. We've got to get American workers back to work, and part of that is bringing home critical production, bringing home critical supply chains, our medical supply chains at the very top of that list. So I've introduced legislation that would secure those supply chains, that would enact new requirements that a certain percentage of our medical needs have to be produced here in the United States. And it also would incentivize business to move their production back to this country. We'd be crazy, after all that we have learned from this experience about our dependence on China, we'd be crazy not to take steps to try to get more independent and to bring production back to this.
Well, Bill Gates is very upset that the president has moved to defund the WHO, at least until we get answers. And he said that's a disaster because the pandemic is basically going to go down to South America and it's going to spread, and the WHO is so great. But given their complicity in this cover-up, I mean, why are we in the WHO for another second is my question.
Great question, and my question too. I think the president is doing exactly the right thing to withhold funding. There needs to be fundamental reform, like a total overhaul of the WHO before we ought to get back into it in terms of funding it. The truth is they failed the world, the WHO has. What have they done to stop this pandemic? What did they do when China was lying to the world, when China was jailing doctors who were blowing the whistle on this? Forget about China knowing in January. They knew in December, maybe earlier, that they had a major health crisis on their hands. And what did they do? They tried to suppress it. They tried to stop people from treating the disease. They tried to stop people from getting the truth out. We're all suffering because of that.
Yeah, Americans died and our economy is fried. And yet we have some of your colleagues that are, as you heard in the intro by Senator Murphy, blaming Trump for this. I mean, this is despicable. Completely
You know,
despicable.
it is the ability of folks, partisan politics, it is unbelievable. It has a way of just totally capturing the brain in Washington, D.C., and nobody can think of anything else. But it's time to set that aside. I mean, it's time to put America first. It's time to go all in on America. We need to get this country back to work, back to ready to work. We need to break the back of this epidemic and then get the country open and get people their jobs back. And part of that means securing our critical supply chains from China.
Yeah, American workers. Senator, President echoed something I've been saying for weeks. He basically said the Congress has to come back into session. We got to start voting on nominees. We got to have regular course of business, or he's going to take action, which is unusual, constitutionally allowed, to adjourn Congress. What do you say about that move? And if this is a all of government approach, where the heck is Congress?
Well, in terms of all of the nominees that are out there, the president has been unable to fill large parts of his government for literally years now because Democrats have slow walked or filibustered every single nominee. And now here we are in a crisis, and I hear my Democrat colleagues complaining that the government isn't staffed. Well, there's a reason the government isn't staffed. It's because you won't let us vote on any of the nominees. So my view is if the Democrats are going to continue to play these games in the midst of a crisis, then the president's got to consider every option at his disposal. We also, though, in terms of Congress doing its job, Laura, Congress has got to take action right now to get this economy back on its feet. We need to take action to rehire every worker who's been laid off. We need to protect every American job for the duration of this crisis and get unemployment down.
Yeah, Senator, if you got one of the biggest economies in the world over there in California shut down until there's a vaccine, basically a lot of it's going to be shut down until we have a miracle immunity test for everybody. And so, I mean, that's just not going to happen. That alone is such a huge part of our economy. But Gavin Newsom, and maybe it's all good intentions, I'll give him good intention, but that's devastating. And they have a very small percentage of deaths, thank goodness, compared to New York. It's just apples and oranges. It's almost like they're two different viruses.
My concern is, Laura, if we don't take action pretty darn quick to get the unemployment rate down in this country, if we don't take action to get people their jobs back and to secure those jobs for the duration of this crisis, we're not going to have an economy to reopen. You can't reopen something that doesn't exist. So it's time for Congress to take action right now.
Senator, thank you for leading on this China issue. Some of us have been called isolationists and xenophobes for about 25 years. And restrictionists on this issue, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it, sir. Good to see you tonight.
Good to see you.